Yeah, hi everyone. This is Brian Walsh with Cycuity. We're a security company based out here in Silicon Valley, in the San Jose area. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years. I currently run all of our Mil business. I've been in the design automation business for many, many, many years, so I'm very familiar with design automation. Most importantly, electronic design. Well, electronic design automation, but really in terms of how customers are building their custom SoCs, FPGAs, and ASICs. What I'm here to highlight today is really less about our technology and really sharing with you what I've seen in my 2.5 years at Cycuity is that there really needs to, when people think about security, it's not just putting a tool to a task, or just running a test and seeing how we did. You really have to begin to take security as a sort of really as a full methodology, and look to take a more systematic approach to building security into the design automation process. So what I'm looking to highlight for you here today is much of my experience, share with a bit about what's coming down the road from the automotive sector, and highlight what we're sharing with our customers, and ultimately too how we're built into the design environment today to help drive really strong security coverage. All right. So with that, um, why why ultimately is Cycuity here today? If you look on the x-axis from 2002 to today, last 20 years, but really over the last five, hardware security vulnerabilities have been on the rise. It's just been year over year, just a significant amount of these vulnerabilities are showing up. And many of these are extremely sophisticated, remote access kinds of attacks, really less about someone getting into a chip or some kind of FPGA, opening it up and doing some damage. These are things that can happen remotely. And here, this is actually a diagram, a chart from NIST inside the United States government. So it's an independent study that was done to show what's happening on the hardware side, and really on the Milaro side that I spend quite a bit of time in, to say we've got to get out ahead of this. We've got to begin to do things on the design side so that we're not having these kinds of vulnerabilities creep up, because much of this data is about what's in the field today. And so what I want to highlight today is the benefits of really shifting the security paradigm left, doing it, really taking a good hard approach to a system, to systematically building security into everything that you do. Um, when so taking this chart, many of our customers too are seeing that security vulnerabilities are happening at every stage of the design. They're happening with third-party IP. They're happening with their own individual IP that they put in the design. It's happening when they integrate the hardware with the software, when they're actually layering in firmware and low-level software onto the device itself. And so again, it really behooves the customer to take a holistic approach from the block level of design all the way up to the full system as system assessment of the security across the design. All right, this is really trying to put it to a picture. So if you look, so this is a stack. This is the hardware design stack from application software all the way down to block level. I put in here hardware root of trust, and that pretty red block there. That's really there to share with you what customers are doing today. And I think it's leaving them with a false sense of security, because what they're believing is that they can buy these third-party off-the-shelf components, what they call hardware roots of trust. They can buy crypto cores. They can even leverage some of their own internal intellectual property, maybe even some hardware roots of trust devices that they built on their own. And they begin to put these into the design, and they think that by putting this into the design inside the chip itself, again, whether it's an FPGA or some broader SoC, that indeed it's protected. What are they trying to protect themselves from? What happened over the last I don't know, 4 or 5 years that's really pushed them? I think we believe that Meltdown and Spectre were sort of the lightning rods that that really got people seeing what's out there and what the disruptive community that exists out there to try to penetrate these devices, what they're up to. And then if you take it up the stack even further to the sort of the software, the boot, and the firmware, bleeding bit was one that was known many years ago. That's been mitigated on that side, and then years ago, Heartbleed on the software side. But again, going down to Meltdown Spectre, that was really the eye opener for everybody, and why these harder roots of trust, these sort of red um, third-party IP elements started to come into existence. And again, the false sense of security, because ultimately, um, even though it's critical to the entire chip, in reality, what happens is that that hardware root of trust, that security feature that was built in, really can not necessarily work as intended. Once it's integrated into the SoC, you can start to see the roots starting to evolve, and sort of crinks in the armor. And then, man, once you start to actually boot ROM and firmware onto the SoC, that's where other problems can get created. Specifically, as you look to configure these devices, and much of the configuration happens at the boot phase. And there you can have all kinds of problems that you had no idea existed. So it really is a critical area in the design process. And quite frankly, just so you're aware a little bit more about Cycuity, that's where all of our focus is. All of our focus is to provide really a secure um, environment, and provide the necessary evidence that you've secured the device from the block level around that hardware root of trust all the way up to the system level, where you're layering software onto the device. And all of our work is done pre-silicon, which really dovetails nicely into this presentation, because what we're highlighting here is this notion of really beginning to shift your security thinking heavily to the left. All right, so what do I mean by mean by that? Well, one, what's the benefit of shifting left? Well, the real benefit is, if you can secure the IP, you can make sure that that IP, the block level, is integrated really well, integrated securely in the SoC, and that SoC that is now getting ignited by firmware and low-level software more at the system level. If you can prove that that's secure, then you've done a phenomenal job for your customer, because ultimately what you're shipping your customer, but the most secure device that they're going to be putting into their, ultimately their system. It could be an F-35 fighter. It could be some Internet of Thing device. It could be inside of our automobiles today. So it's really, really important that we look during the design process what we can be doing to make sure that the ultimately that chip is secure for our customers. And it's really a journey, right? I mean, many of our customers are very focused on the sort of the IP, the block level stage, as I mentioned, and are really just getting to see what happens and what can happen inside the full SoC, and they're trying to do more and more at that level. I'll get into that a little bit as we go through the presentation. Okay, so many people are probably asking, well, yeah, we understand that exists. We're probably already doing a lot of security verification today, and that's true. All of our customers, all of them on the mil side and the commercial side, are doing security verification, but they're taking a very functional verification approach. What does that mean? If you look at this example, this sort of cute little picture, it shows you a key in a secure eFuse block going out to an AES core. And here in this functional world, all the functional world cares about is the expected behavior, does it exist? And did I prove that indeed that feature works as intended? It's not there to look to what the right side is looking for, which is really what we have to begin to think about from a security perspective. What ultimately was unintended? Okay, it's great that we've met certain behavior, but was there anything else that may have happened even while we move that key from a functional standpoint into an AES block? Did any of that key information leak out? Did any of it get to this third-party debug? That's really where security verification, and again, shifting that security left in the design process is so informative. Really, you want to begin to look at, are there other vulnerabilities? Are there other weaknesses that are in this design where that key could indeed get out to that third-party debug management IP and ultimately get compromised? So in the security world, we're not just looking to see, did some expected behavior happen. We want to make sure that there's no known vulnerabilities that exist in the design. So not just some behavior happening, some security feature, but more importantly, all vulnerabilities. We want to look for unexpected things, things that designers wouldn't ordinarily look for because they're very focused from a functional standpoint. Is the design working? Is it meeting timing? We really on the security side need to start thinking about what's unexpected. What should we be thinking about on that side? And then ultimately, as I think you've seen in the earlier slide, it's got to scale. We have to have the ability, if we do all this great work, shifting security to the left and doing much more from the block level up, that all of our good work is going to prove itself out, not only at the block level, but all the way up to the system level. So it has to scale. Whoop. All right, so this is just, I think, sort of a recap. Yeah, we got to, people are doing this today, functional tests, security features. But what we're trying to highlight here today with this systematic approach, we need to start doing more security analysis. We got to really look to explore more what our security requirements should be. It shouldn't be just like a requirement is, wow, we have to make sure this chip is secure, and we're going to go ahead and bring in some piece of IP and feel good that we've done our due diligence. This secure IP has been told to us to be secure. We're going to bring it in. Fantastic. Much more has to be done. You need to look to see where some of these unknown vulnerabilities might exist, unknown weaknesses, where some of your requirements may be incomplete. We got to help each other derive the appropriate verifiable security requirements. And again, looking to the unknown. We have to help during the early process, look to see where some security weaknesses exist. And again, not just at the block level, but all the way up through. And then ultimately, we need to do the work, right? We need to do the lifting. It's got to be an approach that you can easily integrate into your existing design environment. You need to make sure that all the verification testing is available there. So ultimately, when you sign this chip off, you signed it off with a maximum amount of security coverage. All right, this slide probably looks kind of funny because there's no tool that's highlighted here, but ultimately, this is what we're finding. A lot of our customers just don't have. They don't have this even at this level, the systematic approach. So what you're beginning to see here is when you think about your design and that earlier sort of cute picture where I showed the AES block and I showed the eFuse block. Um, well, that key is an asset. That AES core may be an asset. So you need to begin to think about the design from an asset perspective and looking at all of the assets in the design that ultimately you want to make sure are secure. You want to develop security objectives around them. You want to put all of your protection mechanisms around that. That's where all of your focus should be, again, versus just bringing in some IP and thinking that your design is secure. And in doing that, if you can take an asset-oriented approach here, and even just using a simple table like this, it gets you off to a really good start. Really begins to build in that hygiene into the design process from a security perspective. Probably somewhat similar to what happens on the design side. Also gives you a great framework for design reviews because now security verification and review is also being integrated into those design process. So it's a really good table to think about, and again, begin to think about security from an asset-oriented approach and what you need to be doing there. And what's really cool about this asset-oriented approach is not all the information needs to be known right up front. As you're doing the design, as you're beginning to build this out and really refining your security requirement, you'll find that you'll be filling in this table over the course of the design reviews. But again, really, really helpful, super helpful. All right. So I just gave you this sort of simplified table, sort of the way to look at it. So step one is really look at your design from an asset-oriented approach. So if you're going to think about how do we integrate security, the first starting point is let's make darn sure that we understand what the assets are that need protection, that we need to secure, and let's build really robust security requirements around those assets. Let's have an automated approach. Let's make it as easy as we can to build this into our verification process. Really, because Synopsys, Cadence, Metrographic, Siemens are really at the core of design verification. You really make sure that anything you do on the security side needs to also be efficiently utilized in that environment. And ultimately, just like you sign off your designs with caliber for process or for timing or for functionality. You really need to be able to do the same on the security side. You need to make it easy as part of the process to show that you do have a security sign-off process. Um, but in all these areas, it's challenging. But this too is, I think, this Chevron example is just a really good way of beginning to think about security. And again, starting from that previous slide of assets, building your security requirements, beginning to think about how do you embed that in your existing verification process and what you can do to make sure you have a strong security sign-off environment. Since I'm from Cycuity, where do we help, right? The cool thing about Cycuity is we don't tell you not to do anything that you're currently doing. What we're just advocating is let's put a more systematic approach to it, and let's show you that by integrating in the Cycuity technology that allows you to really automate your security verification and bring about security sign-off, and also how to maybe manage your existing security verification techniques. I think that's where we really shine. So where do we help? We really, because our company is all built off of security experts. Our company is a security company, not really a design automation company. We're going to help you understand where those assets are. We spend quite a bit of time, even with consulting, just making sure that you understand how to build robust security specifications and ultimately security requirements that can be verified in your existing verification environment. We actually help you automate that process. I'm not going to go into the detail, but you really can take those security requirements with Cycuity and actually build them into your existing environment. And it's done with a technique called building a security monitor, and that gets built into your existing design verification process. And then we have a reporting mechanism called the security governance platform that's really just sort of an off-the-shelf means of showing the management, showing your customer that you really do have a security sign-off practice. You also have evidence in what you've done, and you can prove it out. And not only evidence on what you've done with our security monitor, but also really matching back to all your existing, what you've been currently doing, just really aligning with assets and aligning with requirements. Again, taking this more systematic approach. All right, so what's the benefits? I started to get into it. Ultimately, you want to, just like on the functional side, as you're designing your chip, you want the strongest functional coverage, you want the strongest test coverage. You want to make sure that you've done a great job with caliber. Everything's going to run smoothly when you tape out. Well, think about, here's a cool chart on security. Really start to think about how you can get the strongest security coverage. And again, it's really complementing what Cycuity has with existing formal techniques and system Verilog assertions. So here's the traditional functional coverage model, right? You have from IP block on the y-axis all the way up to the full system and firmware. As you're developing your functional coverage, what are you doing? You're making sure you're validating through simulation, through directed tests, pseudorandom, SVAs, tests. You're just making sure that you are validating your functionality. Many of our customers have hardware emulation platforms from Siemens or Synopsys or Cadence, and they even extend it up to the system level where they're layering in system level software and firmware to really round out and make sure they can prove they have the strongest functional coverage. Well, when you think about, how can I forget? And then of course, formal is being used more and more and more because of its 100% accuracy, if you will. Unfortunately, you just can't use formal everywhere. But it works extraordinarily well in the block level. All right. from a security standpoint, security is really very analogous to functional coverage, and it really layers in and integrates in really, really well. So you do your existing functional simulation, your functional emulation. If you've done a really good job on your asset-oriented approach, you can begin to say, wow, I'm going to take some of my assets and some of the requirements I built around those assets, maybe they're very block level oriented. I'm going to use formal verification techniques around for the security validation of those requirements. Unfortunately, you just, again, can't scale formal verification even on the security side. It still works extraordinarily well on the block level. So you're still exposed at the SOC level or the system level. However, you can see that you do have some more security coverage. And again, you're leveraging the existing capability that you have. And it too also leverages the asset-oriented, that systematic approach, that table that I was highlighting early in my presentation. All right, so I mentioned earlier about where Cycuity can be providing some additional benefit, how it's sort of complementary. Well, if you think about what we just highlighted, you really want to begin to fill in that higher level. You want to get above the formal level, you want to get into more subsystem, system level. And that's where Cycuity's technology, leveraging our security monitors, can really put your coverage up to much more significant levels. If you just brought in these security monitors, again, using the same systematic approach that I highlighted earlier, but use it in your traditional verification environment, you can extraordinarily improve your security coverage. And then if you have emulation, you can also take these same security monitors and leverage them in your existing emulation environments. So again, if you have the full security environment from verification, traditional verification, formal, hardware, software, co-design, and you can then you really have an opportunity to get extraordinary coverage, really unmatched coverage using Cycuity with formal techniques and some of your existing system Verilog techniques. So I hope that does a really good job of articulating, why a systematic approach to this can be very, very valuable. Starts early on. And I'm also highlighting that you can really use what you have today. Many of our customers are trying, but they need to get that stronger coverage. They need to scale it up, and that's where they're really looking to have some more horsepower from the kinds of work that we do. What's the ultimate benefit? Well, if you build out that table for all of your designs, you've done a really good job of understanding your assets, done a really good job of building out. Again, we're helping you build out those requirements. You're really off to the races, because now you're able to that level of work, that level of effort that you put in is so much more leverage, because you're really able to integrate into your existing environment. It's a hygiene that can carry itself from block level to system level. And ultimately, we're trying to highlight here, and I think everybody knows it, my God, if you can catch things pre-silicon during the verification process, whether it's functional or at the hardware software co-design, before that chip ever gets taped out, it's so much easier to address the issue versus having an issue out in the field. You just look today at what on the Spectre front. Oh my God, what Intel and some of the other x86 providers had to go through in terms of meeting after meeting, figure out where the mitigation need to have, where else could this Spectre meltdown, where could these variants really come up again to haunt us. You don't want to be at that level. You want to do as much as you can up front. We really don't want to have any of these problems occur in the field. And ultimately, too, you're trying to protect your customers, right? So much more advantageous for them as well. Lastly, I'm not sure how many people are beginning to see requirements coming from industry, but here's one example. On the automotive side, they've actually started to say, hey, everyone, you need to start to prove out through this ISO 21434 that you're doing all you can from a cyber standpoint. You got to show that you've got a process. You've got to show evidence that you've done a good due diligence. And that whole systematic approach, that asset-based approach I told you, even just starting from that table and then integrating into your environment with what's existing today and Cycuity, really does it, because you can fully prove it out. And again, ultimately, it's here to help the automotive customer, using this as an example. All right, that's it. I hope I did a good job of getting you some sense for what a systematic approach can provide. Ultimately, I wanted you to see the benefits. I also wanted you to see that a lot of this technology is here today. Cycuity, I think, is here over the last 5 years. It really puts it up to another level, really allows it to scale it. But again, take the systematic approach and really just build everything into your existing verification environment, complement it well, and I think we can do a great job of helping. If there are any questions, I'll leave it to you. Thank you for your time.